The night terror at my door. Just a few years ago, I graduated from college. My name is Kaylee. I'm 26 now, and back then, I was studying business. But enough about me. This story isn't about what I studied, it's about the night that changed everything. The most terrifying night of my life. It started like any other day. I woke up at 5 o'clock, my usual routine: shower, makeup, and some quiet time before class. I liked mornings, they were peaceful. The world seemed to move slower, giving me a chance to collect my thoughts. I had a big presentation that day, so I felt unusually focused, ready to face the day. But that morning, my phone started buzzing incessantly. It was my best friend, Eva. After the fifth text, I finally put down my hair straightener to check. She was freaking out about her boyfriend again. Her texts poured in, saying how crazy and psycho he was acting. Honestly, it wasn't a shock. Her boyfriend, Alex, not his real name, was controlling, paranoid, and invasive. My friends and I had never liked him, and we couldn't understand what she saw in him. Still, none of us fully realized just how dangerous he was. That day, things escalated. Alex accused Eva of cheating. She'd had enough of his constant accusations and blocked him, something we all thought was long overdue. That should have been the end of it. Eva seemed relieved at first, even proud of herself for finally standing up to him. I remember her saying, "I'm done with him for good this time, Kaylee. No more chances." But Alex wasn't the type to let go so easily. As the day went on, Eva's phone blew up with calls and messages from unknown numbers. She ignored them, but I could see the unease creeping into her expression. "What if he's using someone else's phone?" she whispered. I tried to reassure her, but deep down, I shared her worry. Later that evening, Eva and I were in my dorm room. She wasn't technically my roommate, but she practically lived there, sneaking in most nights to study and hang out. We were both exhausted from the day, sprawled out on my bed with textbooks and snacks. We laughed, talked about plans for the weekend, and eventually started to drift off to sleep. Just as I was about to slip into unconsciousness, Eva's phone buzzed. The sound jolted us both awake. The notification wasn't from Alex. It was from a stranger on Instagram. The message read, "Open the door." First, we thought it was some kind of prank. Eva stared at the message, her face pale. "What the hell?" she muttered. I sat up, my heart pounding. Before we could react, we heard a loud, angry banging on my dorm room door. Panic shot through both of us as we realized it had to be Alex. He'd found us. We stayed silent, hoping he'd go away. But then his voice erupted from the other side of the door. "Let me in. I know you're in there, you cheating." His shouts didn't even sound like him. They were unhinged, feral. The banging turned into violent kicks, rattling the door on its hinges. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, but who knew how long it would take for help to arrive? Eva was trembling, tears streaming down her face. I held her hand, whispering, "It's going to be okay. The police are on their way." But I wasn't sure I believed it. The door felt like the only thing separating us from whatever horrific plans Alex had in mind. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the noise stopped. We heard heavy footsteps retreating, growing fainter until everything fell silent. The quiet was almost more unsettling than the chaos. I didn't dare move, half expecting him to come back. Moments later, campus security knocked on our door. Eva and I hesitated, unsure if it was really them or Alex trying to trick us. Summoning my courage, I cracked the door open. Relief washed over me when I saw two security officers. I explained everything, and by the time the police arrived, Alex had been caught trying to flee the parking lot. What they found on him still sends chills down my spine. A knife, rope, and pills. I try not to imagine what he planned to do. Even though Alex was arrested that night, Eva and I were too shaken to stay in our dorm. For weeks, we crashed in a friend's room until we felt safe enough to return. Eva broke up with Alex for good after that, but he didn't disappear entirely. He'd occasionally lurk around, never as violent, but just as unsettling. I'll never forget that night, the night we narrowly escaped whatever horrors Alex had in mind. The haunting in the bathroom. Back in college, when I was 21, something strange happened to me. I lived in the dorms, but occasionally stayed with my parents. One night, I was hanging out with a friend, playing video games in his room. We got so caught up in the fun that I lost track of time. By the time I checked my phone, it was 9 o'clock. I should head back to my dorm, I said, grabbing my things. We said our goodbyes, and I started making my way out. The campus was quiet at night, the kind of silence that felt more eerie than peaceful. As I walked, I realized I needed to use the bathroom. Unfortunately, the closest one was down a dimly lit hallway. As I turned the corner, I froze. The fluorescent lights in front of the bathroom were flickering ominously. The hallway stretched out like something from a horror movie, ending in shadows. For a moment, I debated finding another bathroom, but the other one was much farther away. Telling myself I was being ridiculous, I pressed on. As I got closer, a strange feeling gripped me, an unease that made my chest tighten. Then I heard it, faint banging and the shuffle of footsteps coming from inside the bathroom. I stopped in my tracks, debating whether to turn back, but curiosity or maybe stupidity kept me moving forward. I stepped into the bathroom, my heart pounding. Out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw a shadow move, but when I turned, there was nothing. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating, as if warning me to leave. I slowly pushed open one stall door after another, each creaking louder than the last. And then, in the third stall, I saw him, the janitor. He was slumped on the toilet, looking like he'd been through hell. His pants were partially down, and his eyes were glassy, like he wasn't fully there. His hand twitched in his lap, and I realized what he'd been doing or trying to do. The stench of drugs hung in the air, and his disheveled appearance screamed that he was high out of his mind. I froze, unsure of what to do. He didn't even seem to notice me standing there. Part of me thought about helping him, but fear got the better of me. I quietly backed away, did my business as quickly as I could, and left. As I hurried out of the bathroom, I couldn't shake the image of his hollow eyes. I wondered what had brought him to such a state, what kind of life he led outside the campus walls. The thought haunted me for days. Should I have reported him? Maybe I should have, but I convinced myself it wasn't my responsibility. He didn't seem like he was overdosing, just lost. The memory of that night lingered in my mind long after I'd graduated. Every time I passed that hallway, I felt a chill run down my spine. Whatever he was going through, it wasn't something I wanted to get involved with. To this day, I still wonder if I should have done something. But the memory of his hollow eyes and erratic behavior haunts me, and I hope I never run into him again. I know I probably should have told someone in authority at school about what was happening, but I never did. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was just the overwhelming sense of wanting to avoid more trouble. Of course, I shared it with a few friends. The word got around pretty quickly, but no one seemed surprised. "He's always been off," one of my friends said casually, as though it explained everything. He already had far worse rumors about him. Whispers in the hallways passed along in hushed tones that he wasn't just strange, but dangerous. Someone said he might even be a predator, a monster. I don't know if that's true. What I do know is that he gave me the chills from the very first day. Something about him felt wrong. I couldn't put my finger on it, but every instinct I had screamed to stay away. Story 3. It was just a regular night. One of those peaceful evenings where you kick back, let the world fade, and let yourself unwind. I'd fallen asleep watching The Sandlot, a childhood classic. There's something comforting about the nostalgia of it, the way it reminds you of simpler times. The soft hum of the TV filled the room as my eyelids grew heavier. Before I knew it, I drifted off, lulled into a dreamless sleep. But then, out of nowhere, a loud thud ripped through the silence. I jolted awake, heart pounding. For a moment, I thought it had been part of a dream. But the sound echoed again, faint but clear. It had come from outside my room. I sat up, my senses on high alert. My dorm room wasn't exactly soundproof, and it wasn't unusual to hear people in the hall late at night. But this was different. This noise felt deliberate, unnerving. I grabbed my phone and squinted at the screen. Midnight. I sat there in the darkness, listening. The noise continued for another moment, then stopped. Silence. I told myself it was probably nothing. Maybe someone had tripped, or a drunk student was stumbling back to their room. Shrugging it off, I lay back down and pulled the covers over my head. Just as I began to relax, the banging started. This time, it was on my door. I shot up, my pulse racing. The noise was deafening, each knock echoing through the small space like gunshots. I froze for a moment, trying to process what was happening. My initial thought was that it had to be one of my friends messing with me. Or maybe it was some random idiot who'd had too much to drink. But the knocking didn't stop. It grew louder, more frantic. "All right, enough," I muttered angrily as I stormed to the door. I yanked it open, ready to give whoever it was a piece of my mind. But there was no one there. The hallway stretched out before me, empty and quiet. The only sound was the faint hum of the building's heating system. "Real funny," I shouted, my voice echoing down the corridor. Frustrated, I slammed the door and locked it. For the next 10 minutes, I sat on edge, my ears straining for any sign of movement. Just as I was starting to calm down, it happened again. The banging returned, even louder this time. But what truly chilled me to the core was the voice. A man's voice, desperate and pleading. "Help me. Please help me." My blood ran cold. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the doorknob. The voice sounded so real, so raw with panic, but something about it felt off. Against my better judgment, I swung the door open again. Nothing. The hallway was just as empty as before. My fear quickly gave way to anger. Whoever this was, they were toying with me, and I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I bolted down the hallway, my footsteps echoing against the linoleum floor. At the end of the corridor, I had a choice, left or right. I chose right, my instincts guiding me. As I rounded the corner, I nearly ran into my best friend, Thomas. "Thomas, what the hell are you doing here?" I demanded, my voice sharp with frustration. He looked at me, confused. "What are you talking about? You've been banging on my door, haven't you? Screaming for help?" Thomas stared at me like I'd lost my mind. "Dude, I have no idea what you're talking about. I just got here." I narrowed my eyes, studying his expression. He seemed genuine. Either he was an incredible actor, or he truly had no clue what was going on. "Whatever," I muttered, turning back toward my room. "If it wasn't you, then who the hell was it?" Thomas shrugged, his confusion mirroring my own. I should have stayed with him. Maybe then I wouldn't have let my guard down so easily. Back in my room, I locked the door and crawled into bed. But sleep didn't come. My mind raced with questions, each one more unsettling than the last. Who had been banging on my door? Why? I tossed and turned for what felt like hours. Eventually, exhaustion began to take over, and I started to drift off. That's when I heard it. A thump. It came from under my bed. My eyes snapped open, and my breath caught in my throat. For a moment, I was too terrified to move. Slowly, I leaned over the edge of the bed and peered underneath. Nothing, just the empty space beneath the mattress. I let out a shaky breath, trying to convince myself it had been my imagination. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I couldn't stay in that room any longer. Grabbing my phone, I opened the door and stepped into the hallway. And that's when I saw him. At the far end of the corridor, a man was standing there. He was completely still, his face obscured by the shadows. But I could see something glinting in his hand, a sharp, pointed object. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run. I didn't think. I just bolted, sprinting down the hallway and around the corner. My heart hammered in my chest as I flew down the stairs, my legs moving faster than they ever had before. I ducked into the janitor's closet and slammed the door shut behind me. My chest heaved as I tried to quiet my breathing. For what felt like hours, I crouched there in the darkness, listening for any sign of movement. But whoever he was, he never found me. The next day, the campus was buzzing with rumors. Security footage had captured a man wandering the dorm halls, but no one recognized him. He wasn't a student. He didn't work for the school, and no one knew how he'd gotten in or out. He vanished without a trace. To this day, I don't know who he was or what he wanted, but sometimes, late at night, I wonder, was I his first target, or were there others? I'll never forget that night. The look of desperation in his eyes, the glint of the knife in his hand. All I can say is that I was lucky. God was on my side, because whoever he was, I'm certain of one thing. He wasn't just some random intruder. He was hunting.